August 1995. A federal courtroom in Manhattan, the terror conspiracy trial tied to the World Trade Center bombing, the biggest terrorism prosecution in American history. Then a witness takes the stand whom the prosecution never wanted the jury to hear. He is a serving FBI supervisory special agent, the Bureau's own top explosive scientist, a man the government tried to keep away from the jury. His private memos reached the judge. The judge read them, ruled them evidence the defense is constitutionally owed, and ordered this agent to take the stand against his own side. Now he raises his right hand in the building he has served for 13 years, and he says the one thing no jury in America is ever supposed to hear. I was pressured to change my report on the World Trade Center bombing to make the science say what the prosecutors wanted it to say. Think about what every crime show has taught you. The lab is the honest witness. When science speaks, the case is closed. This man is the science. And he is about to spend the rest of his life proving science can be made to lie. It will cost him his badge, his gun, and almost everything else. So why is he smiling like a man who already won? And how does one chemist put the most trusted institution on Earth on trial? Duc Pho, South Vietnam, early 1970s. A young Army intelligence specialist sits in a tent with a stack of captured documents and a single order. Read them. Keep anything with military value. Burn the rest. His name is Frederic Whitehurst. His job, stripped to the bone, is to decide what truth survives. One day his translator hands him a small notebook taken off a battlefield, the diary of a woman named Giang Thuy Trum, a North Vietnamese doctor killed in the war. There is nothing in it for military intelligence, just the private writing of someone on the other side who wanted to live. By the rules, it goes into the fire. The translator looks at him. "Don't burn this one," he says. "There is fire in it already." Whitehurst doesn't. He carries the diary out of the country in his footlocker. He will keep it for 35 years. Hold on to that notebook. It comes back at the very end of this story and it explains everything. Because here is the character key, set in a single moment under orders in a war zone. This is a man who will not destroy an inconvenient truth, not even an enemy's, not even when the rules say, burn it. He comes home. In 1980, he earns a PhD in chemistry from Duke. In 1982, he joins the FBI. Then in 1986, he reached the summit of his profession, the FBI laboratory. Picture what you already believe it is. The Vatican of forensic science. The room where every episode of every crime show ends. The bench where a man in a white coat holds up a fiber and a jury exhales because now they know. Juries don't weigh lab testimony. They receive it, like physics, like gravity. Whitehurst becomes the Bureau's officially rated leading national and international expert in explosives residue. He is not a skeptic. He is a believer. To him, the lab is the priesthood, and the truth is the whole point of the priesthood. He spends years learning the chemistry of explosions the way a priest learns scripture. Residue, trace amounts, the faint chemical fingerprint a bomb leaves on a fragment of metal. He testifies in trial after trial, and juries hang on his word, because his word is science, and science does not have a side. Then, in 1989, an international terrorism trial in San Francisco, Whitehurst hears a colleague testify about evidence he understands better than almost anyone in the room, and something is wrong. Not a slip, not a rounding error. Statements about the evidence that the data simply does not support. So he does the one thing his oath demands. He notifies the court officials. He reports it, exactly as the rulebook says. And the FBI's response teaches him the only lesson that matters for the next decade. They reprimand him. Not the colleague, him. They send him home, and the false testimony stays in the system, working, untouched. Read that again. The man who told the truth got punished. The work built on a lie stayed in service. So Whitehurst makes a quiet decision that will eventually bring down the most trusted lab on Earth. He starts writing everything down. Every test, every irregularity, every conversation. On paper, dated, in his own hand. One liar he could believe was an accident, but now a question is crawling up his spine, and he cannot put it down. Was it one bad examiner, or is it the whole building? Whitehurst follows his own documentation and the rot starts mapping itself. A fellow examiner's casework turns out to be so sloppy, so unsupported by actual data, that years later investigators will confirm it is riddled with problems. Contamination ignored, tests run without controls, conclusions stated with confidence, then benchwork never earned. 3 protocols get skipped in major bombing cases, including the Van Pack mail bombs, the ones that killed a federal judge in Alabama with a package wired to explode the instant he opened it. These are not parking tickets. These are the cases where a wrong answer ends with the wrong person in a cell, or the right person walking free on a technicality a sloppy chemist handed the defense. And then the structural punchline, the detail that reframes the entire institution. The scientific units of the FBI laboratory are not run by scientists. They are run by agents. The chief of the explosives unit, the man overseeing the chemistry that sends people to prison, holds a degree in political science. Picture the lab the way it actually works. A machine. Evidence goes in one end. Convictions come out the other. And the quality control stations along the line, the ones that are supposed to catch a mistake before it reaches a jury, are dark, switched off, run by people trained to win cases, not to find what's true. Whitehurst is still telling himself he can fix it from inside. Then it gets personal. His own reports start coming back wrong. He dictates his scientific conclusions, careful, hedged, exactly as the data allows. A good chemist writes in maybes because the world is made of maybes. And by the time those reports reach a courtroom, the maybes are gone. The limits are gone. A careful, consistent with has hardened into something closer to, this is what happened. His words, his science, his name on them, his conclusions bent toward whatever the prosecution needs. Think about that. They are not merely tolerating fake evidence. They are manufacturing it out of his own testimony, forging the signature of the one honest man in the room. So he escalates through every legitimate channel the Bureau offers, memos up the chain of command, reports to his supervisors, and finally, a full hour on the phone with the director of the FBI himself, William Sessions. An hour, with the most powerful law enforcement officer in the country. He lays it out, careful and specific, the way he lays out everything. Altered reports, skipped protocols, science bent to fit verdicts. The director listens. Nothing happens. No investigation, no freeze on the bad casework. No knock on the door of the examiners he named. The reports keep getting altered. The convictions keep rolling off the line. The internal channels are not safeguards. They are decorations. Whitehurst is no longer fighting a colleague. He is fighting the building, alone, from inside it, with nothing but a growing stack of dated paper. And while he is fighting that losing battle in the basement of American justice, the calendar is about to make his private war national. February 26, 1993. A bomb detonates in the parking garage beneath the World Trade Center. 6 people died and more than 1,000 injured. The biggest case in FBI history is now pouring into this lab, through these altered pipelines, past these dark quality control stations. And the explosives residue expert who will watch exactly what they do with that evidence is a man who has already learned that telling the truth here gets you sent home. The lies are about to go national, and he is the only one keeping receipts. The World Trade Center evidence becomes a battle over chemistry. The bomb in the garage was built around urea nitrate, a homemade explosive cooked from fertilizer. To convict, the prosecution needs the lab to say, the residue proves the defendants made that compound. But the chemistry is murkier than the story needs it to be. So inside the lab, conclusions get modified toward the prosecution's preferred theory. At one point, the lab even manufactures the suspect compound itself, on its own bench, to shore up the case it wants to tell a jury. Cook the answer, then go and testify to it. And the unit's lead examiner takes the witness stand and delivers testimony that, years later, a Justice Department investigation will condemn as inaccurate, incomplete, and tailored to the most incriminating result. Stay with that phrase for a second. Tailored. Not mistaken or sloppy, not even merely overstated. It's tailored, shaped, fitted, cut to serve the most damaging version of the case. And the reason that word matters is because it does not come from Whitehurst. It does not come from the defense. It does not come from some outside critic trying to embarrass the Bureau. It comes from the government's own investigation, the institution's own ink, describing what happened inside its own laboratory. On April 19th, 1995, Oklahoma City, a truck bomb tears the face off the Murrah Federal Building. 168 people died. 19 of them are children. Same lab, same unit, and a lab report on the bomb that, Whitehurst warns, appears to work backward, starting from the suspect and reasoning toward the conclusion the case needs. So now do the math on this one man's position. He is sounding the alarm on the two worst terrorist attacks in American history, at the same time, from inside the agency investigating both. And then comes the third front, the one with the cameras. Summer 1995, the O.J. Simpson trial. The most watched broadcast on Earth, a courtroom the whole planet checks on at lunch, and the lab's own chemistry chief is on the stand, walking a global audience through blood evidence and a debate over a preservative called EDTA. Whitehurst has already flagged that man's methods inside the Bureau. He doesn't have to say a word in Los Angeles. The defense just has to whisper his name, and the credibility of the FBI laboratory wobbles on live television in the trial of the century. 3 cases, the 3 biggest in the country, all resting on a lab that one of its own scientists says is broken. And here is where the trap closes on him, and you should feel how airless it is. If he stays silent, he is complicit. He helped frame people. Internal channels are a proven dead end. An hour with the director bought him nothing. And going outside, the government threatens to prosecute him if he reveals anything beyond what he's told the FBI and the Justice Department. They even move to wall him off from his own attorneys. Stay quiet and help frame the innocent. Speak inside and watch it die in the building. Speak outside and become the FBI agent helping terrorists walk free in handcuffs. 3 doors. All of them are unbearable. Open the first and innocent people stay framed. Open the second and the building eats the paper. Open the third and the same government he serves drags him into court as a man who helped mass murderers. And remember, he is doing this with a wife, a mortgage, a pension, a reputation, a whole ordinary life balanced on a badge they can pull any morning they choose. If you've ever been the only person in a room who can see the thing everyone is pretending not to see, you know the specific loneliness he is living in right now. And if a channel like this is helping you see the systems you live inside a little more clearly, subscribe, because the next part is the whole reason this story matters. By then, Whitehurst understands something the lab has been teaching him for years. This is no longer just a fight over chemistry. It is a fight over procedure, disclosure, privilege, court rules. The language institutions use when they want to make the truth disappear without ever looking like they touched it. So, he does the most Whitehurst thing imaginable. He goes back to school, law school, at night, after work. If the government is going to use the law to contain him, he is going to learn the law well enough to fight back. And he hires whistleblower lawyers anyway, threat or no threat. And then a door he never chose swings open on its own. His memos reach the judge in the World Trade Center case. The judge reads them and rules them Brady material, evidence so favorable to the defense that the Constitution requires they be handed over. The judge orders Whitehurst to testify. The truth is now legally unstoppable. August 1995. He takes the stand and says it under oath. He was pressured to falsify the World Trade Center report. And the moment those words enter the record, they stop belonging to one case. Because if the FBI's own explosives expert can say the lab bent the science in a terrorism trial, then every defense attorney in America has a new question to ask. What else has this lab touched? Weeks later, September 19th, 1995, Judge Ito declares him a material witness in the O.J. Simpson trial. Cameras on the courthouse steps, his name in every paper. The FBI laboratory is now effectively on trial in the 2 biggest cases in America at the same moment, indicted by its own scientist. If the FBI's own scientist has just put the lab on trial, what does the Bureau do next? And if Whitehurst is telling the truth, how many convictions are already sitting on top of science the government knows it cannot defend? There's a playbook for this. You've seen it run 100 times without knowing its name. When someone exposes a powerful institution, the institution almost never argues with the evidence. It argues with the person. A national television expose airs. Whitehurst's allegations, laid out for the country, and the Bureau's response is not to address a single chemical fact. It is to attack the witness. His claims get briefed to reporters as overstated and incendiary. The investigator becomes the investigator. Inside his own lab, he is sidelined, marked, treated like a man who has lost his grip. This is the engine of the whole story, so let me say it plainly. If you can make the messenger look reckless, you never have to hear the message. You don't disprove him. You just make sure no one has to listen. For most whistleblowers, that's the end. Discredited, dismissed, forgotten. But there is a counterweight building, slow and merciless. The Justice Department's Inspector General opens a full forensic audit of the FBI laboratory. 18 months, sworn, transcribed interviews of Whitehurst and of every examiner he accused, the trial transcripts, the altered reports, the whole paper trail pulled into the light under oath. And Whitehurst feeds it. He is not a man who shows up with feelings. He shows up with documents. On January 8, 1996, he filed an 80-page forensic critique of the World Trade Center trial testimony, line by line, error by error, each one footnoted back to the actual chemistry. Where the institution offers adjectives, he offers exhibits. His weapon was never an outrage. It was precision, and precision does not get tired, and it does not lose its temper, and it does not go away when you call it incendiary. Meanwhile, the institution does something revealing. In Oklahoma City, prosecutors quietly keep the tainted examiners away from the witness stand at the McVeigh trial. Publicly, the lab is fine. Nothing to see. Privately, they are routing around it because they know. And then, the lowest point. Early 1997. Weeks before the Inspector General's report is due, the FBI suspends Frederic Whitehurst. They take his gun, they take his badge, they strip his clearance, they walk him out of the laboratory he served for 11 years, into a year of paid exile, a chemist with nothing left to do. For 11 years, he carried a gun and a badge into that building, believing it was the cleanest room in American justice. Now, security walks him to the door like a suspect. Colleagues look at their shoes. The locks get changed behind him. They have played the final card. Erase the messenger before the message prints. He has lost the badge, the gun, the lab, the title, the standing. Everything they could confiscate. Except the one thing they cannot. Across town, government printers are running a report, roughly 500 pages. His name is attached to nearly every allegation inside it. When those pages stop printing, they will do one of two things: bury him forever as the lab's broken crank, or detonate under the most trusted institution in American justice. The pages keep stacking. If the report is about to print with Whitehurst's name on nearly every allegation, why does the FBI suspend him weeks before it comes out? April 1997, detonation. The Inspector General's report goes public, and it confirms the core of what one suspended chemist spent a decade screaming into the void. Testimony in the World Trade Center case, tailored to the most incriminating result. There's your receipt, paid in full, in the government's own words. Reports altered. Conclusions stretched far beyond what the science could support. Examiners criticized by name. 40 mandated reforms. And, for the first time in the history of the FBI laboratory, outside accreditation. The untouchable lab now has to answer to independent scientists. The believer was right. Every dated memo. Every late night. Right. And now the part most stories would hide because the honest version is stronger than the clean one. The same report does not crown him a hero. It judges many of his other allegations as meritless or insignificant. It questions his judgment. It recommends he not return to the lab. No examiner is ever criminally prosecuted. The FBI admits no fault. Let that sit, uncomfortable and true. The institution conceded the facts while still trying to bury the man. He proved the lab faked evidence, and the lab still found a way to call him difficult. That is what winning actually looks like when you fight a building. Not a parade, a concession through gritted teeth. His answer comes in two moves. May 1997. The McVeigh defense calls him to the stand. The lab's failures are now a courtroom fact inside the biggest domestic terrorism trial in history. And on cross-examination, Whitehurst does something that looks like weakness and is actually the whole point. He concedes the limit of what he can prove. He cannot point to a specific piece of contaminated evidence in this case. He is a scientist to the last sentence. He claims only what the data supports, no more. And that discipline is precisely why nothing he proved could ever be unproven. February 1998. The settlement. The FBI restores him to agent status. They hand back his gun and his badge. They pay him $1.16 million, plus another $258,000 in legal fees. Every disciplinary action dropped. He returns to work. He stays 2 days. And then he walks out, on his own terms. Look at that image. The institution that frog-marched him out of the building was forced to put the badge back in his hand, just so he could be the one to set it down and leave. But he never stops keeping receipts. The night school law degree he earned while the government was threatening to prosecute him became a second career. He founded the Forensic Justice Project and launches a years-long war of public records requests, filing, appealing, suing, prying loose the documents the Bureau would rather let yellow in a vault. The chemist becomes the lawyer. The whistleblower becomes the watchdog. The man they tried to erase becomes the reason the files cannot stay buried. And in 2012, building on his files, the Washington Post revealed the rot was worse than the report. The post-scandal review of old cases had buried its own findings. Defendants convicted on flawed FBI hair evidence were never told their cases were in question. People sat in prison while the paperwork that could free them sat in a drawer. The dam breaks. It triggers the largest post-conviction forensic review in American history. The numbers are not survivable for the myth. Of the first 268 trials examined, where FBI hair analysis helped convict, 257 contained false or misleading testimony. 96%. Almost every single case the system had called solved. 26 of 28 examiners overstated their results. At least 35 of those cases were death penalty cases. 9 of those men had already been executed. There is no appeal from that. There is no badge to hand back to a man in the ground. And then, the human faces. Because the percentages are people. Donald Eugene Gates walks out of prison a free man after 28 years, convicted in part on FBI hair evidence that never held up. 28 years. He went in as a young man and came out to a world that had moved on without him, freed by the same kind of paper trail Whitehurst had been begging the Bureau to look at since before Gates's beard went gray. And the single most damning receipt in the entire story. A hair match the FBI once swore was 10 million to 1 against belonging to anyone else. Decades later, DNA testing reveals the truth. The hair belonged to a dog. Let that detonate slowly. An examiner looked through a microscope, compared a crime scene hair to a suspect, and told a jury the odds it came from anyone else were 10 million to 1. A number that sounds like physics, a number no juror could argue with. And it was a dog's hair. The science was not a little wrong. It was not even looking at a human being. A man lost 28 years of his life to that hair, sold to a jury as near mathematical certainty by the most trusted lab on Earth. 28 years against an animal dressed up as 10 million to 1. That is the machine Whitehurst saw from the inside in 1986. And that is the machine that called him reckless for saying so. Now go back to the frozen image we opened on. The FBI agent on the defense's witness stand. The man everyone said was committing career suicide. You know what you were really watching now. Not a breakdown. Not career suicide. An opening statement. The first words of the only prosecution in this whole story that ever ended in a conviction. Not the bombers, not the killers, the lab itself. The one witness America believed could never lie, finally put on the stand by the one man who refused to look away and found guilty in its own report. The case against the lab itself. And that verdict is still being read. The reviews are still open. The exonerations are still happening. Somewhere, right now, a file is being pulled. One last thing. In 2005, Frederic Whitehurst travels to Hanoi carrying a small, worn notebook he has kept for 35 years. The diary of a dead enemy doctor. The diary he had once been ordered to burn. He places it back in her family's hands, and that is the part of Whitehurst the FBI never understood. For him, truth was not something you used when it helped your side and destroyed when it didn't. Truth was a thing you carried. Through war, through courtrooms, through retaliation, through years when everyone around you had an easier reason to look away. From a tent in Jukfo to the FBI laboratory, he lived by the same rule. You don't burn the truth. You carry it until it gets home. But Whitehurst was not the last man inside the American security state to learn what that rule costs. Years later, inside the CIA, another officer would face a different kind of order. Not to burn a diary, not to alter a lab report, but to live with a word everyone in power was trying to bury: torture. John Kiriakou had hunted terrorists, briefed the president, and served the agency at the center of America's secret wars. Then he said the one word the CIA needed kept out of daylight. And just like Whitehurst, he learned the oldest rule of the machine. The crime is not always what gets punished. Sometimes the punishment is reserved for the man who says it out loud.